Today we're going to continue learning about the Crusades. We're going to start with the Second Crusade, which lasted only 2 years. Now, as we discussed last time, the Crusaders were able to capture the city of Jerusalem in 1099, and following that was a gruesome massacre. The Crusades clearly were not going to be over. Now, Christian victory was said because the Muslim forces were not actually working together. In fact, the Turks were battling another war with a group called the Fatimids over in Egypt to control the Muslim lands. Now, after this first crusade, we have four kingdoms being established called the Crusader states. Going from north to south, we have the kingdom of Edessa, we have the kingdom of Antioch, the kingdom of Tripoli, and the kingdom of Jerusalem. Sometimes they're called counties, principalities. It's different between the books that you look at. Now, the Second Crusade starts after the kingdom of Edessa. That's right, the one Baldwin left the Crusades and captured before by assassinating the king who had just adopted him. That's right. So, Crusader armies from Germany and France are going to come to the rescue. They're not even going to make it to Jerusalem, but they're going to be defeated quickly and thoroughly. We now move to the Third Crusade, which is going to be the most famous of the Crusades. Here we have the famous Muslim leader Salah al-Din, which Europeans refer to as Saladin, and King Richard the Lionheart. That's right, the same King Richard from the stories of Robin Hood. Now, Salah al-Din was a leader of the Fatimid dynasty, and he is going to be the one who defeats the Seljuk Turks. In his lands, he'll have Egypt, Syria, and going east into Baghdad. Now, he conquers the city of Jerusalem from the Crusaders in 1187, so we see 2 years before this crusade starts. Now, what he does, however, is very different and surprising. When we learned about the Seljuk Turks taking Jerusalem, we learned that they massacred 3,000 Christians when they went to the city. When we learned of the Christians capturing the city of Jerusalem, they massacred 20,000 Muslims and Jews. When Saladin took the city, I'm sure people were scared and afraid. But as opposed to murdering the population, he goes and ransoms them off. So you had to pay $10 if you were a man, they called it denarii, $5 if you're a woman, and $1 if you were a child, in order to be set free and to leave the city. Now, many are able to pay this, and it makes Saladin have tons of wealth. Many can't, however, and are sold into slavery. Now, King Richard of England is going to go lead a crusade to reconquer Jerusalem. He was very famous, he was considered a great warrior, and people were excited to follow him. Now, initially, Richard meets with success, capturing the port city of Acre, which is going to be the longest lasting Christian held city in the lands. Now, we're going to see Richard is not going to be quite as kind to Saladin to the people he captured. He will go and do massacres of captured people. Now, long story short, Richard is going to be successful with his first couple of battles, but when he gets to Jerusalem, he's able to siege the city, but he does not have the required materials or men to take the city. He doesn't have the wood to create the siege works, the siege towers, and all the catapults and trebuchets. And Saladin has a very weak army as well. He doesn't have an army strong enough to be able to go and meet Richard's army in battle. So we're at a stalemate. Therefore, Saladin and Richard are going to make a treaty. The Crusaders are able to keep a series of cities along the coast of Palestine. Christians could visit Jerusalem, and the only thing Richard had to do was leave and stop attacking. This treaty obviously does not last. Ironically, it seems that Richard and Saladin are going to make a friendship during this time of the Crusades. There's going to be numerous stories where Saladin is going to show kindnesses towards Richard. For example, in one battle, King Richard has his horse shot out from under him. Saladin, the next day, hearing this, sends him a big, strong, healthy horse. Another story, Saladin heard that Richard went and was feeling very sick, had a fever. The next day, an emissary from Saladin brings a chest filled with ice and water, and fresh fruits. Those are things difficult to go get in the Middle East at this time period and very refreshing for Richard. Richard is said to have thought Saladin to be his equal on the battlefield. They were kind of enjoyed this competition amongst themselves. However, as soon as Richard's on the boat home, he's already planning to go lead another crusade. So as we see, we have the Fourth Crusade coming next. It does not even make it to Jerusalem. We're going to see the Fourth Crusade is going to end in Constantinople with the sacking of the city. Part of the reason why the Byzantine Empire is eventually going to fall to the Turks in 1453 is the Crusaders are going to steal so much of the wealth from the city, the empire never fully recovers. We have a couple other crusades going on. The only other one that we're going to discuss together is the Children's Crusade. It starts with a young boy named Stephen. Now, Stephen had a vision, much like the visions we talked about before. And in Stephen's vision, an angel went to him, the angel Gabriel, the angel who always brought the big news in the Bible. Says, Stephen, with your pure heart, you and other children can capture the city of Jerusalem for God. So Stephen receives a vision saying that his pure heart is going to help the Christians capture the city for God. He tells his parents say, wow, vision, that's amazing. They believe him. Stephen goes, tells his friends, they hear of this. They believe him. Now, the children in this crusade are going to range from probably ages 6 to 14 or 15. So young kids. Stephen is going to go proclaim this message throughout Western Europe, in France and Germany. And as he goes, thousands upon thousands are going to follow because they believed with their pure hearts they would walk to the Mediterranean Sea, the sea would part, and they'd be able to walk directly to Jerusalem. Once at Jerusalem, just as it happened with Joshua and the trumpets of the Israelites knocking the walls of Jerusalem down, they believed the power of their pure hearts, and having God on their side, the walls would fall. Well, Stephen and the children get to the Mediterranean Sea, to a city in Italy. And alas, the seas don't part. Stephen thinks, oh, well, maybe if I hold my arms out like Moses did, which when he parted the Red Sea, the Mediterranean Sea will part. He holds his arms out. Probably looks a little ridiculous. The sea does not part. But then something happens. A boat sails on by. Now a man from that boat sees all of these children. He comes closer and says, what are you all doing? And Stephen then tells them, with our pure hearts, we're going to go take the city of Jerusalem from the Saracens. The man says, well, gee, we're heading down that way. We could just take you there. It seems as if God has provided a blessing and a way for them to get there. So Stephen says, well, it's not part of the Mediterranean Sea, but this is great. They all get on the man's boats. Now, guys, should you get into a boat with a stranger? Yeah, it doesn't end well. Unfortunately, almost all of the children are sold into slavery. A sad end. Now, the thing to remember is, after the First Crusade, no crusades ever recapture Jerusalem. The First Crusade is the only crusade where it is captured. Second Crusade, it's not attacked. Right before the Third Crusade, Saladin captures it. And from then on, it is in control by the Muslim armies. The Crusades end officially when the city of Acre is captured by Muslims in 1219. Here we see up to 8 crusades on this map. Some historians count other things as crusades. It gets very complicated because you have your 8 standard crusades, People's Crusade, your Children's Crusade. get to the topic of the Reconquista. That's going to be the reconquering of the Iberian Peninsula, where Spain and Portugal is, from Muslim invaders. Now, this all starts off because people that were non-Muslim, Christians and Jews, had to pay additional taxes. And, of course, nobles that had lands wanted more land. Now, what's going to happen as more and more land is taken, people who are of Muslim and Jewish faiths become mistreated. You read about King and Queen Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain. They wanted to make Spain purely Catholic, and we have the beginning of the Inquisition. The Inquisition, of course, was the church courts trying to protect against heresy. Torture was used here. It was not a pretty thing. This all culminates in 1492, the same year Columbus sails the ocean blue, where all Jews are told either convert to Christianity or leave the country. 1609, all Muslims are forcibly kicked out as well. Here you see some of the various tortures used. The wheel, yes, that is fire under there that they would essentially be roasting them. Being hung with your arms tied behind your backs. Thumb screws, just other horrible things done during the Inquisition. It's a very dark time in the history of the church. So, these Crusades, why did we spend 2 days on them? What do the Crusades do? Now, we have to remember that the early Middle Ages are often called the Dark Ages, where Europe is completely isolated. We don't have trade, we don't have economic growth, things are bad. But so many Europeans went on crusades and experienced foreign food, the spices, the fabrics, the other goods. They realized, well, wool is very itchy, silk is so comfortable, cotton so comfortable. The food tasted better with all of the peppers and spices. They wanted to have those same comforts. Also, during this time, we see lots of old knowledge that was lost in Europe was preserved in the Middle East. Now, we've talked about this before, this idea when information, food, ideas, religion spread, this is cultural diffusion. We have so much cultural diffusion going to Europe that Europe is going to be permanently changed from the Crusades. Here's another huge thing that happened. Prior to the Crusades, we have typically people bartering. But the problem was the nobles and knights needed so many supplies beforehand, and they didn't have the materials that they could go and get rid of. So selling created coins, and then therefore that money was used to buy the supplies needed to fight the Crusades. And because of this, we have the creation of banks. Now, the next big impact from the Crusades is the fact that the feudal system weakens. Knights and nobles are going to lose power, and kings are going to gobble that power up. It makes sense. Knights and nobles are off fighting these crusades. Many of them are dying, some of them are staying there permanently. Therefore, there's a power vacuum, and the king takes the lands that the knights had, the nobles, and then, as we know, land equals power equals money. Kings become more powerful. Also, with all of this use of money and this demand for more materials and goods as opposed to food, we have peasants having more jobs. They become more craftsmen. Money goes to those craftsmen, creating essentially a middle class where we have people that are poor, people that have some money, and the people that are very rich. So this redistribution of wealth is going to wind up permanently changing Europe, and this kind of idea of a feudal system having to listen to the lord as opposed to the king really become antiquated. We also have a huge negative effect of the growth of anti-Semitism. Now, we mentioned this before. Anti-Semitism, of course, is a mistreatment of people that are Jewish. Jews were blamed for the crucifixion of Christ, although it was the Romans that had done it. Also, Jews were blamed for pretty much everything that happened. The scapegoat. A plague happens. Oh, it was the Jews. There's not enough money around here. Oh, it's because the Jews have it all. We know that this blaming obviously was unfounded, and it was unfortunately a huge problem that caused the looting and murdering of many people of the Jewish faith. Also, it creates a mistrust between the East